In a voice as cold as ice, the king commanded the shackling of his most loyal guard in front of the entire court. What great sin could a veteran soldier, who had served flawlessly for years, have committed to deserve such a disgrace? Was he a traitor hidden in the palace for decades, or was he the victim of a trap set by Commander Kael? Was the king's resolute decision prompted by simple disobedience, or a deeper betrayal hidden behind the curtain? The tension was at its peak, yet Sergeant Rhys appeared calm, not like a convict awaiting his execution, but like the only man who knew a secret. As the iron shackles were fastened to his wrists, the sentence that fell from his lips changed the course of everything. "Do you remember Operation Black Lily, Commander?" Why did this code name create such a look of shock on Commander Kael's face? What truth, buried on a battlefield years ago, was now threatening the king's life today? Commander Kael was barely suppressing his rage. For him, what had transpired was an unforgivable breach of security, nothing short of treason. Only a few hours earlier, as the royal motorcade passed through the main gate, an unidentified, disheveled woman had slipped through the crowd, approaching the convoy with dangerous speed. Under normal circumstances, such an attempt would have been suppressed in seconds, and harshly. But it wasn't. Sergeant Rhys, who was responsible for that very point, made not the slightest move to stop the woman. On the contrary, he raised a hand to prevent the other guards from intervening. The woman had crept right up to the king's vehicle, a fleeting glance was exchanged, and then she vanished back into the crowd as she had come. For Kael, this was an act of incomprehensible insubordination. He couldn't understand why Rhys would tarnish his perfect record with such a senseless act. The only reason that came to mind was jealousy. Perhaps Rhys had never accepted Kael's promotion to commander and had staged this audacious game to undermine his authority. "You breached protocol, Sergeant," Kael said, his voice frigid and devoid of emotion. "You endangered the king's life, the entire kingdom. You will pay the heaviest price for this." Rhys did not answer. He just looked directly into the commander's eyes. In that gaze, there was neither fear nor regret. There was a profound calm, tempered by years of experience, as deep as a stormy sea. At Kael's command, two young guards walked towards Rhys. The metal handcuffs in their hands glinted ominously in the light of the setting sun. The other soldiers watched, frozen, unsure of what to do. To them, Rhys was a father figure, a mentor. They couldn't believe he could be a traitor, but the order came from the very top, from the king himself. In the military, an order is not to be questioned. The cold, metallic click of the shackles locking around Rhys's wrists cut through the silence of the square like a knife. Until that moment, Rhys hadn't uttered a single word. He hadn't shown the slightest physical resistance. But as the cuffs locked, he spoke for the first time. His voice was calm, clear, not commanding, but pleading. Yet even in this plea, the weight of a commander could be felt. "Commander," he said, his eyes never leaving Kael's. "Before I am taken before the king, I request a moment with you." "Just one moment," Kael laughed scornfully. "What is it, Sergeant? Are you going to beg for mercy? Or do you have an excuse to explain this madness?" Rhys didn't respond to the humiliating remark. He just waited. The unwavering expression in his eyes created a flicker of hesitation in Kael. This man didn't look like a panicked traitor, but like a soldier with something important to say. Kael felt the curious and questioning gazes of the soldiers around him. To refuse this request could be seen as a weakness. He nodded sharply in assent. "Speak. But choose your words carefully. These could be the last words used against you in the court-martial." Rhys took a deep breath. He closed his eyes for a moment, and it was as if he had traveled far away, to years long past. The cold stones of the square seemed to give way to the scorching sands of a battlefield. When he opened his eyes again, his gaze was even deeper. His voice, calm and almost a whisper, was close enough for only the two of them to hear, yet its weight was enough to fill the entire square. "Do you remember Operation Black Lily, Commander?" The question was like a password. A key. It unlocked a rusted door in Commander Kael's mind, a door that held memories he had tried to forget, memories that stank of gunpowder and blood. The confident, furious mask on his face instantly froze. His steel gray eyes widened with shock and a glimmer of understanding. Operation Black Lily. The little native child they owed their lives to in the middle of that hell. Those memories created a crack in Kael's armor. He began to sense what Rhys was trying to do, the unbelievable connection behind that seemingly senseless act of disobedience. Time rewound in Commander Kael's mind. The cold, gray stones of the palace square dissolved, replaced by the scorching sands and blistering sun of Kandahar, 15 years ago. He wasn't a commander then, he was a young lieutenant leading his unit, his every step dictated by protocol and military orders. Operation Black Lily, even the name was ironic. The mission itself wasn't as delicate as a lily, but a poisonous flower blooming in the heart of hell. Their objective was to neutralize a high-value target deep behind enemy lines. But the intelligence was wrong. The unit had been ambushed. After days of fighting, their ammunition was depleted, their water was running low, and their communication with headquarters was cut. There was only one way out, a desolate valley known as the Devil's Garden, which no one dared to use. The very name was whispered among soldiers like a curse. It was said to be filled with thousands, even tens of thousands of mines left over from the Soviet invasion. But they had no other choice. To enter that valley and dance with death was more hopeful than staying put and fighting a suicidal last stand. It was at that peak of desperation when the boy appeared from the ruins of an abandoned village at the valley's entrance. He was 8 or 9 years old, barefoot, his clothes torn to rags, his eyes ancient and full of a fear beyond his years. In his hand, he waved a piece of cloth that was once white but was now stained with dirt and rust. Lieutenant Kael had given an immediate order: nobody move. It could be a trap. They use children. Shoot him. That was the protocol. Avoid contact with civilian elements, maintain distance from potential suicide bombers. Kael was playing by the book. He believed the only way to survive, to keep his unit alive, was to adhere to these rigid rules. But Sergeant Rhys, who was by his side even then, disagreed. Rhys calmly lowered the barrel of a soldier's rifle aimed at the boy and turned to Lieutenant Kael. "One moment, Lieutenant," he had said. "There's something about that boy. Look at his eyes. This isn't a trap, it's a cry for help." Kael had objected furiously. "Are you mad, Rhys? You can't risk the lives of this unit for the look in a child's eyes. That's an order." But Rhys, for the first time in his career, disobeyed a direct order. "Sometimes the greatest risk is not listening to your instincts, sir," he said, and slowly, with his hands raised for everyone to see, he began to walk towards the child. Those moments, as the unit held its breath, felt like a lifetime. Everyone expected the vest on the child to explode or for hundreds of enemy soldiers to emerge from the ruins. But nothing happened. Rhys knelt beside the boy. He offered him one of the last sips from his canteen. After drinking the water with trembling hands, the boy grabbed Rhys's arm and began to pull him, not towards the valley, but in the opposite direction, towards a cluster of steep rocks. All the while, he kept whispering the same word: mine. Mine. When Rhys looked in the direction the boy was pointing, he understood. The child was showing them a safe passage, a goat path through the minefield known only to the locals. That day, Sergeant Rhys's instincts, which he had followed by disobeying an order, saved the lives of the entire unit. They made it out of the valley they called the Devil's Garden without a single casualty. The operation's name was Black Lily, but that day, that nameless child was the rarest lily that had bloomed amidst their faded hopes. The flood of memories struck Commander Kael like a physical blow. When he returned to the cold reality of the palace square, his gaze towards Rhys was no longer filled with anger. It held a complex reflection of a memory, a shame, and a gratitude he had suppressed for years. He remembered how protocol had blinded him that day, and how Rhys's human intuition had worked like an oracle. And now, 15 years later, the same man stood before him with the same unshakable calm, telling him the same thing again: look beyond the protocol. Kael swallowed hard. The commanding tone in his voice had vanished, replaced by a curious whisper. What does this have to do with anything, Rhys? What's the connection?" For the first time, a faint expression appeared on Rhys's face. It wasn't a smile, it was more the satisfaction of someone placing the final piece of a puzzle. His eyes shifted to the now empty motorcade route where the woman had approached just hours before. His voice built an unbreakable bridge between the past and the present. "The woman who approached the motorcade today," Rhys continued, his hands tightening slightly within the metal cuffs. "Do you know who she was, Commander?" Kael didn't answer. He just waited. In his mind, with a sudden flash of lightning, the face of the disheveled woman superimposed itself onto the face of the terrified little boy on the dusty roads of Kandahar. It was unbelievable, impossible, but a part of him already knew what Rhys was about to say. Rhys, as if reading his commander's mind, nodded slightly and spoke the incredible truth: she was that boy. The gears turning in Commander Kael's mind almost seemed to grind audibly. It was as if he had hit a wall of impossibility. That boy. But how? That's not possible, Rhys. 15 years have passed. A child left in the middle of a war, whose name we didn't even know. How could you recognize him? And why was he here? This can't be a coincidence. Every word he spoke was a rebellion against his own logic and experience. As someone who had dedicated his life to analyzing people, predicting threats, and creating protocols. He could not accept the existence of such a massive coincidence. Coincidences were a weakness that had no place in the literature of security. Rhys's cuffed wrists were still, but his gaze was like a master key, unlocking all the locked doors in Kael's mind. The eyes. You never forget some of the eyes you see in the middle of a war, Commander. The terror in the child's eyes, but also the desperate intelligence trying to help us. I never forgot that look. When she looked at me from the crowd today, beneath the ragged clothes and the weariness of years, I saw the same gaze. I knew it then. She wasn't here by coincidence. She was looking for me. Rhys paused for a moment, reliving the memory. Protocol required me to break eye contact and report her as a potential threat. But my instincts from that day in Kandahar told me to wait. When she slipped through the crowd and approached, while others panicked, I focused only on her lips. She whispered a single word, Commander. Not in our language, but in her own. But I had never forgotten that word either. Kael's breath hitched. What did she say? Rhys's voice came out like a whispered secret. Lily. She said black lily. She had said that word to me on that day, pointing to the faded flower on the wrapper of the chocolate bar I gave her. It was a code between us. In that moment, I understood that just as she had saved our lives that day, she was here today to save someone else's life. The blood drained from Commander Kael's face. The gravity of the situation hit his mind like a sledgehammer. This was no longer a case of insubordination. This was a top-level intelligence operation, and the man he had just arrested was standing at its very center. Whose life? He asked, his voice trembling. Why is she here? What was the warning? Rhys's gaze was now scanning the rooftops of the palace, the tall buildings in the vicinity, with the sharp focus of a hunter seeking his prey. She fled Afghanistan and sought asylum here. She's been living in London for years. But her past caught up with her. One of the warlords who slaughtered her family back in her country is now working as an international assassin. He's changed his identity, altered his face with surgery. But she recognized the same evil in his eyes, the same scar. That man was in the square today, Commander. Kael's blood ran cold. What? Here? Who is he targeting? The king, Rhys said plainly. The woman identified the assassin in the crowd. He had blended in with the press, holding a professional camera. But its lens was longer than a standard lens, with a small, barely noticeable modification. It's a method used to conceal a rifle scope. She couldn't go to the police. No one would have believed her, and by the time she explained herself in the chaos, it would have been too late for everything. So she had one chance, to warn us. But who could she trust? Then she saw me. The soldier who saved her life years ago. And she took the risk. She risked her life, breached that security cordon, and whispered the one code word only I would understand. When Rhys finished speaking, the silence in the palace square grew heavier. Commander Kael realized he had made the biggest mistake of his life. While he had been caught up in the letter of the protocol, Rhys had read the spirit behind the words. While Kael was trying to punish a security breach, he was actually lowering the only shield protecting the king. His anger gave way to an icy dread and a profound shame. He looked down at Rhys's cuffed hands. Those shackles were no longer a symbol of a crime, but of his own blindness. Where? He whispered. Where's the assassin? Rhys nodded towards the hotel opposite, the one overlooking the Parliament building. The woman saw the man enter that hotel. One of the rooms on the top floor. That was the clearest line of sight for when the motorcade passed. The motorcade has passed, but the king is still in the palace. The assassin could be waiting for the moment the king appears on the balcony, or for the next opportunity when he leaves the palace. He must still be there. Kael didn't hesitate for a second. All protocols, all procedures in his mind were erased, replaced by a single objective: protect the king. For the first time in years, he was going off book. He turned to the guard beside him, his voice no longer that of a commander but of a war leader. Uncuff the sergeant. Immediately. Then he grabbed his radio. The expression on his face was no longer that of a palace security chief, but of a commander fighting on the front lines. He yelled into the radio, his voice echoing across all frequencies, instantly putting every security unit around the palace on the highest alert. All units. Code Blue. Code Blue. Active assassination threat. I repeat, active assassination threat. Target is the king. Immediately lock down the hotel overlooking Parliament, roof and upper floors. Alpha team to the roof, Bravo team to the lobby. No one leaves the building. Move now. The code blue order echoing from Commander Kael's radio instantly transformed the disciplined calm of the palace square into the electrified center of a storm. The guards, who had stood like statues as part of a ceremonial duty, shed their formal identities and snapped into action, their inner warriors emerging. The rhythmic sound of polished boots on concrete was replaced by the urgent, sharp steps of an operational scramble. A guard rushed to Rhys, undoing the handcuffs with a single, swift motion. Rhys didn't waste a second, rubbing his wrists. His eyes were still fixed on the hotel roof, his mind calculating possible scenarios and escape routes. He was no longer a ceremonial guard, he was a seasoned field commander on the trail of his prey. Commander Kael came to his side. There was no anger or shame on his face now, only the steely expression of a commander determined to control the situation. "I need your eyes, Rhys. No one can identify this man better than you. You will hunt him down." It was less an order and more a plea, a concession. For the first time in years, Kael was admitting that protocol was not enough, that he needed a man's intuition and experience. They walked quickly towards an armored command vehicle pulling up to the main palace gate. The interior was a hub of countless screens, maps, and communication devices. The moment the vehicle's door shut, the chaos of the outside world turned into a focused, dense silence within. One screen showed live feeds from all the hotel's security cameras. Another displayed the building's architectural blueprints. Reports of units taking position flooded in over the radio. Alpha team on the roof. Thermal scan is negative. Roof is clear. Bravo team has secured the lobby and all exits. The building is on total lockdown. Kael took the microphone. Target is unidentified, extremely dangerous, and a professional. His face and identity may be fake. Report the slightest suspicion to Central Command. No risks are to be taken. He then turned to Rhys. There are hundreds of rooms, dozens of staff and guests in that hotel. How are we going to find this needle in a haystack? Rhys's eyes were locked on the screen showing the hotel's blueprints. He pointed to the north wing of the building. He doesn't think like a soldier, Commander. He thinks like a hunter. And hunters always leave an escape route. The best firing angle on Parliament is from the corner rooms of the top 3 floors of the north wing. But he won't choose the top floor. The access to the roof is easy, but it's also the first place that will be checked. He won't choose the floor below it either, because the stairwells will be locked down in a panic. He will choose the spot that both preserves his firing angle and gives him the quickest access to the fire escape. Rhys placed his finger on a point on the plan. 2 floors down. 3rd room from the corner. Room 714. The firing angle is perfect, and it's right at the head of the corridor leading to the fire escape. The moment he's detected, he can be on the back street in 30 seconds. Kael was once again struck by the military genius in Rhys's analysis. This was the kind of experience that condensed hours of analysis into seconds. He immediately grabbed the radio. "Gamma team, to the 7th floor. High probability the target is in room 714. Proceed silent and unseen. Wait for my command to enter." The atmosphere inside the command vehicle grew even more tense. The main screen now showed the feed from the Gamma team's helmet cams. They were seeing everything through the eyes of soldiers gliding like ghosts down the narrow hotel corridor, moving with attention ready to explode at any moment. Their steps were silent, their movements lethal. Looking at the screen, Rhys whispered, "It could be a trap. A professional this good doesn't leave a trail." Before they enter the room, they should check the adjacent rooms. Thermal scanners are useless at this stage, the walls are insulated. Kael instantly relayed the order. "Gamma, hold. Check 712 and 716. Do a silent scan." The minutes felt like an eternity. A crackle from the radio made everyone jump. "Central, this is Gamma lead. 712 and 716 are clear. Guests are in their rooms, unaware of the situation." Now all attention was on the brown, wooden door of room 714. Through the helmet cam, a faint sliver of light was visible from under the door. Someone was inside. Kael looked at Rhys. Rhys just nodded. It was time. Kael brought the microphone to his lips. His heart was pounding against his rib cage. The order he was about to give would either initiate an act of heroism or trigger a catastrophe. "Gamma lead," he said, his voice firm and clear. "Target is presumed to be inside. Maximum caution. On my command. Breach." In the command vehicle, everyone held their breath. On the screen, the soldiers placed the explosive charge on the door and pulled back. The team leader began a silent countdown with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. All eyes were glued to the screen, the silence so intense it was deafening. What was behind that door? An assassin targeting the king, or a deadly trap waiting for them? The absolute silence in the command vehicle was shattered by a deafening explosion. The image on the screen blurred for a moment with the shake of the helmet cam, and when it refocused, The door to room 714 was gone. A cloud of splintered wood and drywall dust filled the hallway, mixing with the smell of cordite as Gamma Team flooded inside. Clear. Clear. Bathroom clear. Closet clear. The voices echoed from the radio with the cold, mechanical tone of military professionalism. But there was something strange in them. There was no sound of a fight. No return fire, no struggle, no moment of a target being brought down. As the helmet cam panned across the room, Kael and Rhys, hunched over the screen, saw the truth. The room was empty. But this was not a simple emptiness. This was the ominous silence left behind by a predator. The window opposite the bed was open, and in front of it stood a state-of-the-art sniper rifle mounted on a tripod, its barrel aimed at Buckingham Palace. On a small table beside it, the screen of a still-open laptop streamed security camera footage from various angles around the palace. On the floor were a few empty shell casings and a bottle of water. They had found a ghost slayer. Everything was there, the weapon, the surveillance equipment, the position. But the ghost itself had vanished into thin air. Kael's face was ashen. "He's gone," he whispered. "He knew we were coming and he fled. Hold all exits in the building. Check the roof, the basement, the ventilation shafts. He cannot have left the building." The radios came alive again, orders flying through the air. The operation inside the hotel had turned from a hunt into a frantic search. But Rhys kept staring at the screen. On his face, in contrast to Kael's panic, was a look of deep thought and a disturbing suspicion. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Commander," he said slowly, his eyes never leaving the laptop screen. "This man is a professional. The moment he knew he was compromised, he wouldn't have left an arsenal like this behind. That rifle is worth tens of thousands of pounds. An assassin never leaves his most valuable tool behind. Unless..." He didn't finish his sentence, but the possibilities turning in his mind made the air in the command vehicle even colder. Kael looked at him, trying to understand what he meant. "Unless what, Rhys? Unless this is a decoy?" Rhys shook his head. "It's more than that. This is a stage, Commander. A perfectly designed stage. He left us everything he wanted us to find. He wanted us to focus all our attention on this room, on this hotel." Rhys turned to one of the operators. "Rewind the camera footage on that laptop a few seconds. Enlarge the feed showing the main entrance of the palace." The image on the screen rewound. "Stop," Rhys said. The image was from approximately 1 minute before they breached the room. Everything looked normal. But Rhys had seen the small detail that only a soldier, only a hunter, would notice. "There," he pointed. "Look at the shadow of the flagpole. There's a slight pixelation in the image. This isn't a live feed. This is a recording from a few minutes ago, set on a loop." Kael's blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" "What I'm saying," Rhys said, standing up, "is that the assassin was never in this room. Or if he was, he left hours ago. He left this fake stage for us, ensuring that we would lock down our entire security force on a hotel miles from the palace. Our entire force is currently laying siege to an empty room." The moment of realization struck Kael like a bolt of lightning. In that instant, all the pieces fell into place. The seemingly insubordinate sergeant, the child from the past who had saved him, the coded warning, the empty sniper's nest. It was all part of a larger, more sinister plan. "But why?" Kael asked, his voice laced with desperation. "Why play such a game? If his target is the king, why draw our attention away?" The expression on Rhys's face was the darkest it had been all day. In his mind, he scanned the king's daily routine, his habits, the moments he was most vulnerable. And then, he found the terrifying possibility. Because his real target was never the king on the balcony. That was too high profile, too risky. He was waiting for a simpler, more guaranteed moment. He knew what the king does after stressful events like this. He knew his greatest passion, his greatest weakness. Kael understood where Rhys was going. He whispered in horror, "The horses." "Yes, Commander," Rhys said. "The royal stables. The least protected area of the palace, where protocol is at its most flexible. The one place where the king loves to be alone, where he even keeps his own guards at a distance. The assassin isn't in the hotel. He has already infiltrated the palace grounds, and right now, he is near the stables, waiting for the exact moment the king comes to see his favorite horse to calm his nerves." Everyone in the command vehicle froze. While they were chasing a ghost miles away, the king was walking straight into the real predator's trap. Without a moment's thought, Kael yelled at the driver, "To the palace. Now. Fastest route." He then grabbed his radio, his voice filled with panic and urgency. "All units at the palace. Code Blue is cancelled. We are moving to Code Red. I repeat, Code Red. Cordon off the royal stables immediately. His Majesty is to be prevented from approaching the stables. I repeat, stop the king. But the only reply from the radio was a muffled static. Jamming. The assassin had cut off communications too. Kael and Rhys looked at each other. Technology, armies, protocols, they meant nothing now. There was only a race against time. And they were starting far, far behind. As the command vehicle sped through the London traffic, time inside seemed to stand still. While Kael's frantic radio calls met only the dead air of the signal jammer, Rhys sat in silence, mentally mapping every corner and shadow of the royal stables. Take the service road behind the stables, he ordered suddenly. Kael relayed the command without question. The vehicle screeched to a halt on the gravel path. The doors flew open, and both men sprinted out. The world behind the stables was one of quiet dignity. The smell of fresh hay and old leather was a stark contrast to the scent of cordite still in their minds. And then they saw him, King Charles, standing with his favorite Arabian stallion, a picture of peace after the day's chaos. His security detail was at a respectful distance, everything appearing routine. But Rhys's eyes weren't on the king, they were scanning the shadows, the rooftops, the rafters. He saw it in an instant, a silhouette in the crossbeams of the hayloft, the distinct shape of a pistol with a suppressor. There was no time to shout a warning, it would only make the king a stationary target. Rhys didn't think. He acted. Get down, he roared, shoving Kael aside as he drew his own sidearm. In the same heartbeat, a soft thud came from the rafters. The bullet zipped past where the king had been standing, embedding itself in a wooden post. Rhys's return fire was a single, deafening crack that echoed through the stables. The silhouette in the rafters jerked once, then tumbled lifelessly into the hay below. The sudden silence was broken only by the panicked whinny of the horses and the frantic sound of security guards finally rushing in, their own radios now crackling back to life. The king, stunned but unharmed, stared at Rhys, the disgraced sergeant, still standing, his pistol smoking in the dim light. Kael picked himself up, brushing the dirt from his uniform. He walked over to Rhys, the space between them no longer defined by rank, but by a shared, violent truth. Your Majesty, Kael said, his voice hoarse, this man just saved your life. He disobeyed an order, but he honored a soldier's duty. The incident was buried under layers of official secrecy. Hours later, in the now quiet palace square, Kael and Rhys stood side by side. I owe you an apology, Rhys, Kael said, the words heavy with the weight of his own folly. I was looking at the rules. You were reading the story. Rhys looked out at the palace grounds, his calm finally returning. Protocols are there to protect us, Commander. But sometimes, the greatest security lies hidden in a person's heart. The king offered Rhys a medal, a promotion, a command of his own. Rhys simply smiled. I am a guard, Your Majesty. My place is here. And on that day, everyone understood a profound lesson, that true loyalty is not found in blind obedience to rules, but in knowing precisely when to break them to do what is right. And that the ultimate safety of a king, or a kingdom, is not forged in walls of protocol, but in the unshakable character of a single, good man.